It was a quiet morning at the airport. People were rushing to catch their flights. Some looked tired, some were excited, and some were just in a hurry. Among them was a woman, calm, focused, and alone. She walked slowly but with confidence. Her black dress was neat. Her hair was tied back. She carried a small leather bag. Her eyes looked serious but kind. When she reached the boarding gate, the airline staff scanned her ticket and gave her a quick look. Something in their eyes changed when they saw her face, but they said nothing. She nodded politely and walked toward the plane. Inside the plane, passengers were already getting comfortable. A man in a business suit looked at her with surprise. A woman holding a baby whispered to her husband, "Look at her. Is she in the wrong place?" The woman didn't stop. She walked straight to the VIP section. The seats were bigger, softer, and had more space. Only a few people were sitting there, men in suits, a woman with a laptop, and one old man sleeping. The black woman looked at her ticket, then quietly sat in seat 1A near the window. Some passengers stared. Others looked away. A young flight attendant approached. She smiled politely but looked uncomfortable. "Ma'am," she said in a soft voice, "can I see your ticket?" The woman calmly handed it to her. The flight attendant checked it and frowned a little. "Thank you. Just one moment, please." She quickly walked to the front of the plane. A few seconds later, the pilot came out of the cockpit. He looked around, then walked directly to the woman. "Good morning," he said, but his voice was cold. "I believe there's been a mistake. These seats are reserved for VIP passengers only." The woman looked up at him. Her voice was calm. "There's no mistake." The pilot gave a tight smile. "I'm afraid these seats are not open for upgrades or special requests." "I didn't request anything," she replied. "This is my seat." He looked at the ticket again. His jaw tightened. His voice dropped a little. "Ma'am, I don't think this is the right seat for you." Passengers nearby started watching closely. Some pulled out their phones. One man whispered, "Is he serious?" The woman didn't move. She didn't argue. She looked the pilot in the eyes and said only 5 words. "This is where I belong." There was a long silence. The pilot glanced at the flight attendant, who looked nervous. "Please return to your assigned seat, or we'll have to ask you to leave the aircraft." But the woman didn't move. She turned to look out the window. The sun was rising. She placed one hand gently on the armrest. Her fingers didn't shake. Her eyes didn't blink. In her mind, voices from the past started echoing. "You'll never make it in this world. People like you don't sit in front. You should be grateful for what you get." She had heard those words all her life. But not today. Today, she was in seat 1A, and no one could move her. The pilot was getting impatient. "If you don't comply, I'll have to call security." The woman gave a small smile. "Do what you have to do." He stared at her for a moment longer, then turned and walked back to the cockpit. The flight attendant remained frozen for a few seconds, then slowly walked away too. A quiet tension filled the air. The other VIP passengers kept looking at her, some curious, some angry, some confused. No one said a word. The woman leaned back in her seat and closed her eyes. In her memory, she saw her mother's hands, tired but strong, packing her school bag. She saw her young self reading books about flying planes. She saw the job interviews where people smiled fake smiles and said, "We'll call you back." She saw the tears she never showed, the battles she never shared. The plane started to move. The engines came alive. The man with the phone kept recording. He whispered, "This video is going viral. I can feel it." But the woman didn't care about the camera, or the stares, or the whispers. She just sat there, quietly, in seat 1A. And she waited for the moment when the world would know who she really was. The plane was now in the sky. Seat belts clicked. Windows showed only clouds. Flight attendants served drinks with polite smiles. But the silence in the VIP section was different. It wasn't peaceful. It was heavy. The black woman in seat 1A sat still, looking out the window. Her face was calm, but her mind was far away. Behind her, whispers had started. "Who is she?" someone asked softly. "She didn't look like a VIP," another voice said. "Maybe she sneaked into that seat. She looks too normal." The man in the business suit leaned toward his neighbor. "She's probably just trying to act important. Some people like drama." The woman heard them, every word, but she didn't turn. She had heard those words before. Flashback, 10 years ago. She stood at the front desk of a small airline company, dressed in her best suit. Her hands held a folder of documents, her degrees, her training, her flying hours. "I'm here for the interview," she said. The receptionist looked her up and down. "Wait here," she said with no smile. Minutes passed, then hours. Finally, a manager came out. "Sorry," he said. "The position has been filled." She looked behind him. She could see other candidates still waiting. All of them were men. All of them were white. That day, she walked home in the rain. She didn't cry. She didn't scream. She only whispered to herself, "One day, you'll see me again." Back in the plane, a young flight attendant named Clara quietly walked past the woman. She paused, then turned back. "Excuse me," she said gently. "Can I get you anything?" The woman looked up. "No, thank you." Clara hesitated. "If you need anything, just press the button." There was something in Clara's eyes, something different from the others. Not fear, not judgment. Something like curiosity, or maybe even respect. Clara walked away, but kept glancing back. At the back of the plane, a group of flight attendants whispered together. "The captain's angry," one said. "He thinks she's lying," another added. "But her ticket says seat 1A. So what's the problem?" The first one sighed. "The problem is, she doesn't look like someone who belongs there." The woman closed her eyes again. Another memory returned. Flashback. Childhood. She was 8 years old. At school, during career day, her teacher asked, "What do you want to be when you grow up?" "I want to fly planes," she said with a smile. The class laughed. The teacher laughed too. "No, sweetie," the teacher said. "Pick something more realistic. Maybe a nurse, or a teacher." She lowered her head. That evening, she told her mother what happened. Her mother took her hand and said, "Don't let small minds tell you where you can go. If you want to fly, then fly higher than all of them." Back in the present, a small boy walked past with his father. He looked at the woman and smiled. "Hi." She smiled back. "Hi there." The father gently pulled him away. "Don't bother her," he said quickly, without even looking at her. The smile faded. In the cockpit, the pilot spoke to his co-pilot. "This is not acceptable," he said. "She's in that seat to prove something. She wants attention." The co-pilot didn't answer. "I'll speak to security after landing." The pilot continued. "We can't let anyone just walk into VIP because they feel important." Still, the co-pilot said nothing. He looked through the glass at the clouds and wondered, what if she really was important? The woman reached into her bag and pulled out a small photo. It was old, torn at the corners. It showed her standing next to a plane, smiling. Her father was beside her, wearing a pilot's uniform. On the back of the photo, in her father's handwriting, it said, "Keep your head high. They'll try to stop you. Let them try." She put the photo back and sat upright. No more memories, no more pain. It was almost time for the world to remember that some seats are earned with silence, strength, and scars. The plane flew smoothly through the clouds. Passengers read magazines, watched movies, or slept. But in the cockpit, the pilot was not calm. He sat stiffly in his chair, arms crossed, eyes on the control panel, but his mind was somewhere else. "She doesn't belong there," he said sharply. The co-pilot, a quiet man in his 30s, looked over. Her ticket says Seat 1A. Sir. The pilot didn't respond for a moment. Then he said, sometimes people buy their way into things. Doesn't mean they deserve it. There was anger in his voice, not just about the woman, about something deeper. The co-pilot stayed silent. Flashback. 15 years ago. A younger version of the pilot stood in a training center, holding a cup of coffee. He wore a fresh white shirt, proud and confident. Then she walked in. The same black woman, much younger, holding a folder and wearing the same quiet confidence. The pilot had seen her name on the list, Elaine Thomas. She was smart, calm, always on time. Her test scores were higher than his. One day, their instructor said in front of the group, Elaine scored the highest again. She's a natural. He smiled on the outside. But inside, something twisted. Back in the cockpit, the pilot rubbed his forehead. She was always too sure of herself, he said out loud, as if the co-pilot had asked. She didn't act like the others, always quiet, always watching. Acting like she was better than us. The co-pilot replied, maybe she was better. The pilot turned sharply. Excuse me. I'm just saying. The co-pilot continued carefully. If she earned her seat, maybe we should respect that. The pilot laughed, cold and bitter. You know what people like her do. They wait until everyone's worked hard, then they show up and demand a seat at the top. She didn't demand anything, the co-pilot said. She didn't have to, the pilot replied. She came in dressed like she owns the place, sat in that seat like she bought the plane. The co-pilot looked down. He didn't want to argue, but the pilot's words made something inside him shift. In the cabin, Elaine, the woman in seat 1A, sat quietly, flipping through a book. Her face was calm, but her mind was watching everything. She remembered the pilot's face. She hadn't seen him in years, but his expression hadn't changed. That same look, years ago, when she got the final flight instructor position, and he didn't. That same stare when she got promoted and he stayed behind. Flashback. 7 years ago, Elaine sat in a small office with glass windows. A plaque behind her read, Executive Director, Flight Operations. The same pilot stood in front of her, holding a resume. He needed a job. She read his file. He had good skills, but a history of complaints from coworkers. She spoke kindly, but directly. We need team players here, not people with ego problems. His face turned red. So you're rejecting me. I'm choosing what's best for the team, she said softly. That day, he left the office with fire in his eyes. He never forgot the embarrassment. He never forgot her. Now flying the same plane she was riding, the pilot felt small, angry, lost. She's playing a game, he whispered. She's here to watch me, judge me. The co-pilot looked at him. Or maybe, she's just flying like everyone else. The pilot didn't answer. His fingers tapped the dashboard. I'll make a report, he finally said. She refused to move seats. She created a disturbance. The co-pilot asked quietly, did she really disturb anything? The pilot looked at him for a long moment. She disturbed me. In seat 1A, Elaine felt the air change. She saw the cold glances, heard the whispers, felt the judgment. But she also felt something else. Power. Not the power of a loud voice. The power of silence. The power of being exactly where she belonged and making them uncomfortable. Not with anger. Not with noise. But with truth. She didn't need to fight. She just needed to wait. And the pilot? He didn't know it yet. But this flight was not just in the sky. It was flying straight into his past. Elaine sat still in seat 1A, watching the clouds drift by. Outside the window, the sky looked soft and peaceful, but inside her heart, old battles were rising again. She had hoped this flight would be quiet. But nothing was ever quiet when she showed up in places people thought she didn't belong. She reached into her bag and pulled out a small phone. It had only one number saved under the name, Mama. The phone rang once, twice. No answer. She stared at the screen, then let out a soft breath. Her mother had passed away 2 years ago, but sometimes, when things got hard, she still called the number, just to hear the voicemail. She leaned her head back and closed her eyes. The voice came like a warm wind rising from her memory. They'll try to push you down. Not just once, not just twice, over and over. But baby, you don't fight with fists. You fight by staying still. You fight by sitting where they don't want you to sit, and staying there. Her mother's voice had always been calm, like a song. Even in hard times, she spoke with kindness, not anger. Flashback. A tiny kitchen, years ago. Elaine was 16. She came home crying from school. They said I can't apply to flight school, she said. They said girls like me don't get in. Her mother placed a warm hand on her head. Then you'll be the first, she said with a smile. But what if they don't let me? Then you sit outside their door every day until they do. Back on the plane, the seatbelt light blinked on. Like turbulence. Elaine held onto the armrest and whispered to herself, "You didn't come this far to get scared now." Far behind her, passengers were still whispering, "She's just doing this for attention. I bet she's one of those influencers. Did you see how the pilot looked at her?" But one little girl, sitting in economy class, kept looking toward the VIP section. She tugged her mother's sleeve. "Mom, I want to be a pilot." Her mom smiled. "You can be anything." The girl pointed toward Elaine. Like her. A few rows away, flight attendant Clara stood near the drink cart, watching Elaine from a distance. Clara had noticed something earlier, the way Elaine looked at the plane's design, how she checked the engine through the window before boarding, how she held her ticket like someone who knew exactly where she was going. Clara whispered to her coworker, "She doesn't just look important. She looks like someone who built something." Her coworker shrugged. Still, she could have avoided all this by dressing fancy or saying who she was. But Clara shook her head. No, she wanted to see how we treat someone we don't think is important. In the cockpit, the pilot was pacing. Again. "She's testing us," he muttered. "This is personal." The co-pilot looked over. "What if it's not?" The pilot didn't answer. He stared at the control panel, but his mind was still stuck in the past. Still angry, still bitter. He remembered when he lost the promotion, when Elaine became head of operations, how people clapped when her name was announced. He remembered pretending to smile. But inside, something burned. He had told himself she didn't deserve it. He told himself for years. Now she was back, on his flight, in his seat of honor, and he couldn't stop her. Elaine looked at the time. She knew what was coming next. Whenever someone like her dared to sit in power, the world pushed back. But she wasn't afraid anymore. Not after years of being the only woman in every room. Not after fighting for every certificate, every hour of flight training, every job interview. Her phone buzzed softly. A text appeared, just one line. From her assistant. "Everyone is watching. We're proud of you." She smiled. Not because she needed praise, but because someone saw the silent war she was fighting in this plane, without raising her voice. Back near the front, Clara walked toward her again. She gently leaned down and said, "Excuse me. Are you?" Elaine turned her head, looked her in the eyes, and simply said, "Not yet." Clara blinked, confused, then smiled. She didn't understand the full meaning. Not yet. But something told her this woman was someone big. Elaine looked out the window one last time. The clouds cleared. The sun was shining on the wings of the plane. And for the first time on this flight, she smiled. Because soon, everyone would know exactly who was sitting in seat 1A. The plane touched the ground with a soft thud. Wheels rolled. Engines slowed down. People started gathering their things. But something was different. The cabin was quiet. Nobody rushed out of their seats. Nobody laughed or pushed forward. They were all waiting for her. Elaine sat in seat 1A, still calm, still quiet. The young flight attendant, Clara, stood near the front. She didn't move either. And the pilot, still in the cockpit, stared at the door. He was sweating. He knew what would happen when she walked out. He knew people were filming, watching, talking. He had said too much, assumed too much, and now it was too late to undo it. A voice came over the speaker. "Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to New York. Please remain seated until the seatbelt sign turns off." Elaine slowly stood up. She picked up her small black bag. She fixed her jacket. And then she turned. She looked down the aisle. Dozens of eyes stared back. Some with shame, some with awe, some with quiet respect. A little girl in economy whispered, "That's her, Mom. That's the pilot lady." Her mother nodded slowly. "She's more than that," she said softly. "She's the boss." Elaine began walking down the aisle. Step by step, row by row. People moved aside without being asked. Some even stood up, not out of fear, but out of respect. No one said a word. Even the man who first insulted her in VIP didn't look her in the eye. At the front of the plane, Clara waited. As Elaine passed, Clara whispered, "Thank you." Elaine smiled gently. "Keep watching. Keep learning." Then she stepped out of the plane. On the jet bridge, a man in a black suit waited for her. He stood straight, holding a folder. He handed it to her and said with pride, "Your schedule for next week, Captain Thomas. The board is waiting for your report." Elaine nodded. The cameras from inside the plane caught that moment. The passengers watched in silence as the woman they had judged turned out to be the CEO of the entire airline. The video of that flight went viral. Millions watched it. Pilot tries to remove black woman from VIP. Then she reveals she's the CEO. But the title didn't tell the whole story. It didn't tell about the years she worked in silence. It didn't tell about the nights she cried, or the moments she almost gave up. It didn't tell how many times she sat in a room full of men who didn't want her there. But it showed one thing. That dignity is louder than anger. Later that day, Clara got a message on her phone. It was from the airline headquarters. "You've been recommended for a special training program, Executive Pathway, by request of CEO Elaine Thomas." Her eyes filled with tears. No words, just emotion. And the pilot. He was called into a meeting the next morning. Not to be punished, but to be asked, "Why did you assume she didn't belong?" He had no answer. Only silence. Because deep down he knew. She had been flying higher than him the whole time. Elaine stood in her corner office, looking out at the runway. Planes were taking off. Sky full of dreams. She remembered her mother's voice again. "Sit where they don't want you to sit, and stay there." And now, after all these years, she didn't just sit. She led.